And the winner for the most unusual shoe of the year, and maybe since, I don't even know, that is the Fila Mondo Forza, and mostly due to the outsole tread, but once you open up the midsole, there's also some interesting stuff in there too. Let's get into it. Now the Fila Mondo Forza is primarily built as a tennis shoe. I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of people asking if you can play pickleball or outdoor basketball in these shoes, which I will answer once I kind of get through all the features of this shoe. I mean, I know the outsole tread of these is kind of like the main, eye-catching part of it, but there is, like I said, so many things going on in these shoes that make them so unique and unusual that we'll start off in the uppers like I normally do. But you can't really talk about the uppers until you talk about the giant slab of outsole tread that comes up over the uppers that directly interfaces with the knitting on top. Now, what I like about the uppers, though, is that it has a pretty big section of molding here that protects that knitting on the medial side. So, even if you are a really extreme everter when you drag and you would, kind of break through more of the shoe than this outsole tread would protect, you still have a little bit more protection on the inside or medial side of the shoe. Now, what I noticed in getting into these shoes is that the uppers did feel just like a lot, all right? That's really how I can describe it around my foot, especially when I was tying them down. And then once I took the laces out, you can really see why. This is a slipper tongue lined shoe, except for the fact that that slipper tongue is sewed into the back and then it goes independent of the lace line in the midfoot of the shoe, and then it connects back up into the toe box. So it is kind of a hybrid slipper tongue and three-piece tongue. You get a lot of reinforcement around it. The one thing I noticed was, I couldn't get a ton of lockdown around it. And because the knitting in the forefoot is a little bit thin, there is some padding there, but it is more of a minimalist design in the forefoot and so maximalist in the rear foot with all this padding that's going around the booty liner, with all this stitched reinforced leather here on the outside of the foot. I'm not sure if that's real leather or synthetic leather, but same purpose. And then you get also on the medial side here with the stitching of the Fila logo. It really is the tale of two shoes. The rear foot of the shoe, super maximalist. The forefoot of the shoe, super minimalist. If you look at the breathability test on these, it really tells the whole story. These things heated up 162.2 degrees, cooled down another 101.2 degrees. Now, if you correlate that to the breathability mapping or the airflow map, as you can see, the fog is just pouring out of the forefoot because that weave is just so minimalist and it just allows so much air exchange. The thing is around the rest of the shoe, there's so much material that can hold on to heat. Plus the strobo board is just so furry, I should say. There's so many fibers that can trap heat. It's the strobo board that is trapping the majority of the heat in the shoe. Now, if you put, an orthotic or some sort of insert on top of that, you might get some deflection of that heat. But suffice to say, even though these do breathe very well, there's just a lot that can hold on to that heat. Now, if you look at the upper durability test, 10-second tie grit sandpaper, I actually did the outsole durability test as well in the same spot because there's so much outsole rubber there. The outsole rubber, really not even a millimeter of damage. And then that drag guard, the burr does not get through it, which for a really thin piece of molding, that is very good. So in terms of dragging or sliding, yeah, these are gonna be fantastic. It's just that, the uppers, like I said, they're two different uppers, right? One from the midfoot on, one from the forefoot on, and that's gonna have a lot of implications for playability as well as how to use that outsole tread. All right, and as promised, the midsole teardown, to me, this was just as unique and interesting. You look at this midsole, it is a 3 centimeter stack height. This thing is enormous. There is so much foam in this shoe. I thought it was the outsole tread that was pretty heavy, and I think it is pretty heavy, but the foam also is super heavy. It really feels like just a little bit more of a forgiving Phylon, the foam on this. That's really what it feels like. It's a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more molding around your foot. The shank on the Mondo Forza, though, is actually made partially of wood. I think it's also partially plastic. I think it's encased in something, especially because it is external, right? You can see it through the bottom of the shoe. But much like the midsole foam, which is recycled, right? It's multi-material recycled foam. The shank also looks to be more of almost a composite material with wood and probably some plastic. Remember, wood does bend, does have some resonance to it, and because it is sandwiched between really heavy rubber as well as foam, it's not going to bend as much, right? It's kind of going to integrate with the rest of those materials. So I think if you had a really thin shoe and a really molded shank that was wood, obviously you'd have some issues potentially with either stiffness or breaking, snapping, right, or getting it, you know, beat up by the elements. But the way Fila did it, I think it should last just as long, if not better, than any other shank. There also is the same material that goes around the heel counter, which I thought was pretty interesting, that I think just maybe imparts maybe a little bit of stability to the back of the shoe. I thought that was pretty unique, actually. If you look at this setup on the bounce height test, got 31 centimeters in the heel and then 29 in the forefoot. Interestingly, this is a kind of foam that does better with more foam. Some foams do a lot better when that ball bearing can interact more with the ground, which I thought was pretty unique. That really did kind of translate on court. These definitely did not feel like rocket ships. They didn't feel like they had a ton of bounce. Like I said, these are more for a ground assault, or a certain type of ground assault, I should say. So if you're buying these for the molding capabilities of that foam and the stability of that foam, not necessarily it really doing anything to bounce you to the moon or anything like that. All right, but getting into the outsole tread, this is what probably everybody clicked on this thumbnail to see. On the medial side, it is a wave pattern, a lot like the Asics Court FF2 and 3. It's a very flat wave though, so you're not getting the digging power that some other wave patterns will give you. It's much more of a sliding pattern, right? Those are really wide waves, really wide treads. Now on the lateral side, you have what looks to be racing slicks. However, when you start to peel the tread with your fingers, you can see these are linear lines of rubber, right? There's gaps between that rubber there, right? So, I mean, they're really small, but when you put weight onto the shoe, right, when you push down on it, that's when supposedly those little gaps are supposed to almost like open up and just act like suction cups on the ground. Does it do that or not? It is a different story, but I thought it was interesting that I thought this was just a Formula 1 tire. In terms of the speed ratio of these, they only come in at a 1.95, and honestly, I think that's overselling how fast these shoes feel. It's where the weight is distributed on these shoes, I think, makes them feel a little bit clunky. It's because they're so bottom heavy, right? All the weight of these, especially in the forefoot of the shoe, which we'll talk about, but in the forefoot of the shoe, you really feel the weight underneath of you. So even though, you know, I mean, they are over 15 ounces for a size 11, but even though they're not, you know, 16, 17, 18 ounces in the forefoot, like I said, they feel super substantial underfoot. So I think that speed ratio is pretty representative. Like I said, in the outsole durability test, we talked about that before. The durometer of the rubber is super high. It's 22.5, so it should withstand, you know, being on a really gritty court. But when we talk about the playability, we'll talk about some of the issues these things have as well. But before I talk about the play test, gotta talk about the fit of these. These were a little bit unforgiving for me, for sure, just because there's just so much going on in the uppers of these. A narrow medium foot, you can go true to size. A 2E, I probably would be going up 1/2 size. You really cannot go up over a 1/2 size on these because they just become so heavy, disproportionately heavy to the fit of the shoe, right? You know, especially in that forefoot. That's the real issue on these. So a 4E, I think, probably just look somewhere else. Now, for the snake bitten foot, because there is so much foam in the heel, and because it isn't super squishy either, it is pretty substantial and supportive. Something like heel pain or Achilles pain, I think these are great, right? I mean, they're super protective. Ball of foot issues, things like that, because the shoe kind of squeezes a little bit. If you're a narrow foot, I think it's fine. But a wider foot, I think you might have some issues with squeezing. In terms of somebody with like tibial fasciitis, you know, shin splints, anterior tibial stress syndrome, this is one I probably would avoid as well because, like I said, it's gonna feel so heavy lifting it up in dorsiflexion all the time, right? And that's usually what aggravates that on the front side of your lower leg with shin splints. So just kind of watch out for that profile and kind of where you land on that, and that's kind of where you would sit if you could use these or not. All right, but getting into the play test, this was it was interesting, put it that way. At first, they were okay, and these also make the most unique and distinctive noise on court of any shoe. You could tell someone is playing in this shoe with your eyes closed, right? Like 10 courts down, right? That's how unique the sound is. There are a few times I actually tripped over my own feet in these, not because of the stability or the grip, just because I was paying attention to the sound of them so much, it was just distracting me from my footwork. If you're on a grittier, I'd say, you know, really well-maintained hard court, something meant for a WTA or ATP event or NCAA event, then I think these will grab okay. Any painted line, anything that's remotely not sanded, these things will, for me, they started to slip out from underneath me. At one point during the playtest, toward the end, I was actually using another shoe. I was using the Nike Vapor Light. I put these back on because it started to mist a little bit. It just made the courts just a little bit slick. I mean, not much. Like other shoes were still gripping. This thing was sliding like an ice skate. I just think you really have to be a sliding first type player to like these. I don't really see the traction on this flat pattern. If you're on a black top court that's a little bit grittier, it's okay. And like I said, any court that has a lot of grit, like a really slow hard court, I think will do okay. And like I said, it's not just the lateral side, because remember, the medial side has a wave in it. You should be able to press your big toe into the ground and get some grip from this, but because that wave is so flat, right? Normally on a tennis shoe, right, the medial side of the shoe is a little bit flatter, the lateral side and the heel is where you get the grip from it, right, where you actually come to the stop. Whereas on this one, I know it's meant for going like sideways where these little slits should open up and grab into the court, but as soon as you can see the tread, it's a little dirty. As soon as the tread gets a little bit dirty, or as soon as you get dust or, you know, moisture, whatever on this, that's when you start going to the races. So, like I said, if you can clean off the tread and you're on a very well-maintained court and you're sliding first, I think they're okay. The other problem is because the forefoot is so thin, right? It does, like I said, feel like a lot to get them off the ground. So someone that plays very low to the ground, very prowling type game, strong legs, I think we'll really like these, especially someone that plays everted a lot, right? If you play on the medial side of the shoe quite a bit, right? You play evert a lot. I actually think you might really, really like these if you kind of stay grounded. If you're someone that likes that explosion type feeling, or, you know, a lighter player that's really looking to, you know, zoom back and forth, it might be a little bit of a mismatch. I love the idea, and I love the fact that, you know, they really took the time to think of some really interesting, you know, lateral containers and things like that. And just for the tread profile, it's still not enough in the uppers, I would say. So I think that the idea is a really good springboard for further ideas. And I'm glad that Fila took the chance in doing something interesting, especially because like these slits, I would have never guessed to do that. And I think there's a place for this. And I think in further iterations of the shoe and further iterations of Fila, I think they're going to refine this and it's going to get better and better. So I really super applaud the design, and I just super applaud trying something interesting, right? I love that. I just think you really have to be the right player to extract the performance that these can give. Because otherwise you might be looking for something that the shoe just isn't going to give you. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, especially about this shoe. I know I say that a lot, but especially about this shoe, because like I said, it is just, I think it's going to divide people, and I think there's going to be some people that buy 100 pairs of these, and I think other people that just aren't going to look for them. So I just love to know your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you want to see another shoe that I think is pretty sliding first and one of the better sliding shoes on the market right now, the ASICS Gel Resolution 9 Go to the Knife, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the next video.